The D.C. Court of Appeals is now set to hear the Trump administration's case against the massive judicial overreach from the lower courts. They'll be hearing about the power grab of Judge Boasberg attempting to steal authority from the executive branch with his TRO, or Temporary Restraining Order, on deportations under the Aliens Enemy Act. This is an article from Fox News discussing this. This by Haley Chi Singh. They title it Court of Appeals to Hear Oral Arguments in High-Profile Deportation Suit Involving Venezuelan Nationals. Let's see. The Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit will hear oral arguments Monday, today, on whether a lower court can properly address the Trump administration's efforts to deport Venezuelan nationals via a 1798 wartime law. The administration asked for a stay pending appeal shortly after an initial March 15th order was issued, calling it a massive, unauthorized imposition on the executive authority to remove dangerous aliens who pose threats to the American people. The Trump administration had attempted to invoke 1798 wartime authority to deport Venezuelan nationals, which they managed to get some out before this judge stepped in, including the alleged gang members of Tren de Aragua. Last week, Obama-appointed D.C.-based Judge James Boasberg issued an order to immediately halt any planned deportations of Venezuelan nationals to El Salvador. A plane carrying hundreds of U.S. migrants, including Venezuelan nationals removed under the law, arrived in El Salvador hours later, despite the order. Oh, so sad. Now, Boasberg, for his part, held a Monday evening fact-finding hearing where he ordered the Trump administration to submit more information on the flights, including information on how planes departed the U.S. that were carrying any people who were deported, quote, solely on the basis, end quote, of that proclamation. How many individuals were on each plane, where the planes landed, and what time each plane took off from the U.S. and from where, which of course he has no authority to ask for. Judge Boasberg is engaging in gross overreach with these questions. It is a direct violation of the Alien Enemies Act. The Alien Enemies Act was explicitly made to give the president the power to apprehend, restrain, and remove alien enemies during wartime or credible threats of invasion, which is exactly what MS-13 and Tren de Aragua are. This law is explicit. I don't know how to say this any clearer, that the president shall have the power to act via proclamation or regulation with no mention of judicial pre-approval or oversight of operational details. The judge's only action should be to decide whether it was valid for the Alien Enemies Act to be invoked at all. He has no authority to ask how he's doing it, what's happening, none of that. Typically, the Alien Enemies Act has been viewed largely as unreviewable because of the way that this statute was built. The Founding Fathers understood that in times of war or great danger, a president needed to act as commander-in-chief. You can't have these little black-robed douchebags stopping you at every turn. But this political activist in a black robe with a gavel, Mr. Judge Boasberg, and his demands for flight details, essentially trying to force the government to justify its logistics and intelligence, is an action that is directly contradictory to what the Alien Enemies Act is all about. And in a sane world, this appeals court would slap this down immediately, and the TRO would be thrown out. But we are dealing with an appeals court that is historically known for being left-leaning, often just a rubber stamp for leftist ideology. However, there is some good news here, and that is that Donald Trump, in his first term, managed to get 3 judges appointed to the court, potentially shifting the balance of power. So rather than be known as the D.C. Circus Court of Appeals, they might actually stand for something like the Constitution now, but we'll have to wait and see. But you know what the media wants you to believe? And I know this shouldn't be a surprise, and it's not really, but I can't help but find it remarkable to behold. But the media still is attempting to brazenly rebrand this as a constitutional crisis brought on by Donald Trump, not the judicial activists, these judges that keep issuing TROs. For example, let's take a look at this article from The Hill. This is by Lauren Irwin. She titles this article, "Trump is declaring war on judicial system," conservative former federal judge says. She writes, a conservative former federal judge, Michael Luttig, said he believes President Trump is declaring war on the judicial system. Boy, this judge is real smart. The judge, who was appointed by former President George H.W. Bush, and served on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit from 1991 to 2006, criticized the president in an op-ed published Sunday in the New York Times. Luttig said President Trump has wasted no time in his second term in declaring war on the nation's federal judiciary, the country's legal profession, and the rule of law. Really, Judge? Trump? We are looking at record numbers of TROs, which has typically never been done or very rarely done pre-21st century. These lowly district court judges should not be issuing national temporary restraining orders. But let's continue. The Trump administration is battling a federal judge who sought to stop the deportation of nearly 300 Venezuelan gang members. The judge ordered the plane not to leave the U.S. or to turn around if they already had. He pressed the administration on the timing of the flights after the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, suggested they defied his court order and deported them anyway. The Trump administration said it complied because the planes left U.S. territory by the time the order was issued. And Trump has sharply criticized Boasberg and has called for him to be impeached. And Attorney General Pam Bondi claimed Boasberg had no right to be asking those questions, which she is absolutely right. It is none of his damn business. It is not within his jurisdiction to question how the Alien Enemies Act is operating. He only has the authority to try and say it was invalidly invoked. Period. Full stop. Now, Boasberg is not the first judge Trump and his allies have called to be impeached. Oh no. He has called for impeachment for the people who investigated his legal cases both in court and Congress. It is no secret that he reserved special fury for the justice system because it oversaw his entirely legitimate prosecution. Really? For the government charged with the crimes of attempting to overturn the 2020 presidential election and purloining classified documents from the White House. He's the president. Who do you think decides what's classified or not? Secreting them at Mar-a-Lago and obstructing the government's efforts to reclaim them. Luttig argued that Trump is going to plunge the country into a constitutional crisis if he does not reverse course, and will likely become very unpopular with the American people. Well, the judge is an idiot because Trump's base, they're not going to abandon him over this. Not even close. And right now, he's headed towards his absolute peak approval rating with the American people that he's ever had. Now, it just never ceases to amaze me, my friends, how this attempt to recast and reframe this issue that it's Trump that's the bad guy. And this has happened since before he got elected the first time. He's always castigated as the aggressor, always declaring war on the people that are attacking him. And in this case, he's declaring war on this sacred institution of unbiased, pious, little men and women with black robes who are just trying their darndest to uphold the law and the Constitution. They're just innocent children beleaguered by Orange Man Bad and his evil designs to overtake the country and become a dictator. The truth is, and anyone with eyes can see, it is the judges, both in Trump's first and now second term, that have effectively been acting as an arm of the Democrat Party with their record-shattering number of temporary restraining orders launched against his administration. In his first term, we saw over 60 of these things. And now, in term number 2, the new pace is setting to shatter records again. Even the left-wing rag Axios is admitting that what is happening is a problem and needs a fix. This is an article from Sam Baker on Axios, who writes, lower courts growing power over the president. Here's a little graph of the temporary injunction, the temporary restraining orders or the injunctions against Trump in the first term. He says, it is true, as the White House claims, that the courts have blocked President Trump's executive orders at a particularly high rate. Or that is an understatement. It is also true, as White House critics argue, that simply ignoring those rulings would undermine checks and balances established by the Constitution. The big picture. Trump and his White House aren't alone in their frustration with district court judges blocking major parts of their agenda. Presidents Obama and Biden also had major policies blocked by the same type of rulings. Legal scholars from both sides of the aisle have criticized the rapid rise of such sweeping orders. Now let's skip down to the end and get to his final thoughts on all of this. He says, what's next? Lots of proposals have been floated over the past few years to limit nationwide injunctions. Some legislative plans call for eliminating them entirely, which may be too restrictive. Others would only allow appeals courts to issue them. Supreme Court Justices Samuel Alito and Neil Gorsuch have been sharply critical of district courts blocking federal policies, but it is not clear that they could persuade 3 more justices to agree on a specific plan to rein them in. The one idea that no legal scholar has seriously endorsed is simply define the courts, as many of Trump's closest allies, including Vice President Vance, have suggested. This massive upward surge of judicial activists turning themselves into mini kings with their little fiefdoms is a direct assault on the Democratic Republic of the United States. They are massively overreaching. Their power is nearing a tipping point that could turn this country into chaos. This isn't a sustainable way to run a country. You can't have lowly district court judges effectively paralyzing the nation, stopping presidents with their executive actions or bills across the country from a single courtroom with their nationwide injunctions. The Constitution and its structure did not support courts wielding this kind of power. Article 3 establishes a judiciary with district courts as the lowest rung. They are trial-level forums meant to handle localized disputes, not dictate national policy. And yet here we are. Their jurisdiction is supposed to be limited. Yet, corrupt judges like Boasberg in D.C. or those in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals routinely issue TROs that halt executive actions everywhere. These judges are leapfrogging the appellate process. They are sidelining the Supreme Court's role as the ultimate arbiter of constitutional questions. When you have a single, unelected judge, an unelected nobody who can freeze a president's agenda at will, it turns the entire hierarchy of this country upside down, overriding the executive's Article 2 granted authority and Congress's legislative intent. This cannot be allowed to stand. And as for Boasberg himself, his actions are a direct assault on the separation of powers. And he knows this. He's doing this on purpose. The Alien Enemies Act, for instance, gives the president near unilateral power to act against alien enemies in national security contexts. Boasberg's temporary restraining order on this, demanding flight details and prior notification, is authority that he doesn't even have. He's not allowed to have. And yet he has halted the entire nation's national security agenda because he just wants to. And so far, he is getting away with it. So you either need Congress or the Supreme Court to act on this, and it needs to happen fast. I believe the purpose of these activist judges are twofold. First and foremost, it's all about halting Orange Man Bad's agenda whenever and wherever they can, especially since their party is imploding. These Democratic judges, these liberal activists, understand that it is unlikely that the DNC is going to wield national power anytime soon, and so they have taken it upon themselves to be the new arm of the Democrat Party. And the second piece to this is, I believe this is an attempt to push Trump to just disregard their unconstitutional rulings. They want to force him into this so that they can claim that he is a dictator, a Hitler reborn. They think that this will be the tool that they can finally use to destroy Trump once and for all. Now, I don't think that they would succeed even if Trump did say to hell with this, but that is the plan. And so far, the Trump administration has not fallen for the bait. But in any case, we are reaching this next staging area where the appeals court will hear this current case. What happens next? Only time will tell.